Good afternoon, boys and girls. Decided to wait until today to do the final reading for our books. Friday was a bit much after the parade and all the sweet things that parents were saying, so I decided to wait until today, just Tuesday, and finish our books where we started them in the classroom. So I'm going to pick up where we left off with Making Bombs for Hitler. And where we last left off, Luca had gone with the Red Army. He was going to go home to see he found out his father was alive. He was going to go see his father. Well, ended up Luca was dropped off. He was badly injured, almost dead, and Pani Zimlock was getting him medical attention, and of course Lida wanted to stay right by his side. So we're gonna see what happens with the last little bit and how our story ends. So chapter 23 is titled Fleeing. I patched the knees of Luca's trousers with the remnants of a shredded Nazi flag and darned the holes in his shirt with coarse thread from Pani Zumluck. How I wished the damage to his soul could be fixed that easily. We knew we could not stay in the American camp. The Soviets would be back looking for him, but also for me. I was sure that they suspected I was from the East, like Luca. We had one last bowl of pea soup and said goodbye to Natalia. We joined the thousands of refugees who walked from camp to camp. There was safety in the crowds. If we weren't registered at a specific camp, how could the Soviets find us? By August 1945, we had walked so many miles of dusty road that my feet ached despite the good boots Astrid had given me. I despaired at night of so many bombed-out cities and towns and so many desperate people. Would the world ever be safe again? I searched the crowds for familiar faces, but I did not talk about myself, nor did I ask about Larissa. Luca was also quiet. We had learned the hard way that we had to be very careful when it came to asking questions about our loved ones. At each camp we reached, we'd stand in the food lineup and listen to the gossip. It was a way to find out what the Soviets were up to and how the different camps were dealing with the issue of forcing refugees to go back to the Soviet Union. Once we had caught up on the news and filled our stomachs, we would go to the camp entrance. Luca would stand watch, and I would carefully go through all the fluttering papers, the wishes and missives of lost loved ones. Once, my heart nearly stopped when I found a note signed Raisa Barukovich from Kiev. Luca. My hand trembled with excitement. I held the paper out to him. Is your mother's name Raisa? Yes, he said, snatching the note. But as he read it, his face sagged in disappointment. This isn't my mother's handwriting. Maybe someone wrote it for her. His face lit up with the possibility, but as he read further, the hope was extinguished. He crushed the note and threw it onto the ground. It's not my mother. His voice was flat. Wrong street address, wrong details. Barukovich is a common name in Kiev. So is Raisa. I picked the note out of the dust and smoothed it out. This may not be your mother, I said as I pinned it back onto the wall, but she's someone's loved one. Luca sighed. You're right, Lida. I shouldn't have thrown it down like that. Weeks later, we shared a campfire and tea with a Czech woman and her 2 children. The toddler had dark eyebrows and brown eyes like her mother, and the older child was a fair-cheeked flaxen-haired boy who pushed the woman away when she tried to comfort him. Without thinking, I sat close to where he was and quietly hummed a lullaby. He stopped fidgeting and cocked his head to listen. Moments later, he walked over and sat down by my feet. As I hummed, he hummed along, raising his left hand to wipe a tear from his cheek as he did so. I noticed a black mark on the inner part of his wrist. "You've got a bug there," I said. "Let me brush it off." The boy looked up at me, startled, then hid his wrist. "It's not a bug," said the mother. "It's a tattoo." I had seen the Auschwitz tattoos, but this was something different. And on a child? I looked up at the mother and saw that her bottom lip trembled. "I found him abandoned at the side of the road," she said. "He was babbling in German, but no one knew where he came from." "What does the tattoo mean?" "I didn't know at first," said the woman, "but a nurse at one of the camps told me she had seen others with the same mark. They're children who were stolen from their families and adopted by German families. The tattoo is so that they can't entirely blend in. Once the war ended, the families didn't want the children. The nurse said she'd turn a blind eye if I wanted to rescue him. There's no chance of finding his real family after all." The mother's words felt like ice piercing my heart. Could this be why Larissa had been with that Nazi family? The possibility sickened me. Would she still be with them now, or had they discarded her like trash now that the war was over? Could she survive on her own? Would she even be able to remember who she really was? I clutched the crucifix around my neck. Larissa, please be safe." For the rest of August and into fall, Luca and I walked from camp to camp in search for loved ones. I read thousands of notes scrawled on faded bits of paper, but I never found Larissa, and Luca couldn't find his mother. While shivering in line for soup at one of the British camps in November, I listened to snatches of conversation around me. "They're not forcing people back to the Soviet Union anymore," said a gray-bearded man whose gnarled fingers wrapped around his steaming tin cup. "The Brits, you mean?" asked the younger man standing in front of him. "The Americans haven't been sending people back for a few weeks," said the older man, "and now the British won't either." Chapter 24. Weisbeck Camp, British Zone, Germany. It was a relief not to have to run anymore. The British camp we settled on had many Ukrainians. Despite their pledge not to forcibly repatriate us, I didn't want to take a chance. I told them I was from Lviv. So did Luca. The year ended and 1946 began, then 1947, and we were still refugees. The camp became our home by default. Where else could we go? No country wanted us. My nimble hands and keen eyesight ensured me steady work over the years, and I didn't mind being paid in food. Refugees like to be tidy. They needed to look clean and eager when they went for their interviews with the immigration offices from different countries. I always had a long list of people waiting for my services. I amazed myself at what I could create with the limited materials at hand. Out of old Soviet and Nazi uniforms, I fashioned decent suits, coats, skirts, and blouses. We never went hungry again. Luca became an apprentice to a German pharmacist in town. It was never his plan to stay in Germany, but he needed to hone a skill to impress the immigration officers. I tried not to feel discouraged, but it was frustrating to still be on German soil this long after the war. The ramshackle camp school and church looked nearly permanent. We displaced persons, DPs, had been at the camp for so long that we put on plays, had elections, and ran a camp newspaper. Still, no country wanted us. I watched every day as the mail was distributed. I watched people's faces and envied the joy when their loved one was found, or a distant relative in Canada or Britain or America agreed to sponsor a lost soul. But who would sponsor me, and who would sponsor Luca? We had no family. Sometimes I wondered if the whole camp would empty out and no one would be left here but Luca and me. The Germans were friendly, and many had little to eat, and their bombed out homes were no better than the barracks we lived in. But when I went into town, I looked into the faces of women and children and men. I remembered how they had looked at me when I was a slave. I didn't know what they saw when they looked at me now, but they made me uneasy. I always searched the faces of blonde girls in town, and I always dreamed of finding Larissa. One day I made up my mind to tell the woman who visited from the Red Cross everything that I suspected. I told her about seeing a girl who looked like Larissa and with that Nazi family. I told her about the flaxen-haired boy with the black mark on his wrist. You think the same thing might have happened to your sister? I didn't reply right away, but finally I said, yes. Then the woman sighed. It could be very difficult to find her if she can't remember her past. All we can do is look out for a blonde girl with blue eyes who looks like she was born about 1938. We will do our best. Epilogue. 1951. I cherished my barracks room with a flush toilet down the hallway and a kitchen I share with just a few. It is so much more spacious than I had when I was an Osterbeiter. After a long day of sewing, I walk to a grassy area and sit on a tree stump to watch the children play. There's a lilac bush growing near the stump, and its scent wraps me in memory. I reach up and touch the cross around my neck, and I remember the happy times when my parents were alive. In my heart, I'm sure that Larissa lives. I would have felt it if she had died. But the Red Cross had been looking for her for years, and they had found no trace. How I wish there was some way to find her. Should I forget her? Even if I could, the mere scent of lilac would bring her memory back. I stand up and stretch and walk back to my barracks. Lucas sits on the bench in front of my building. In his hands is a thick envelope. Where did you get that? He smiles. The usual place. It's for you. He doesn't give it to me right away. He has an odd look on his face. I wonder if the letter is from Xenia in Israel or Natalia in Montreal. It's from Canada, he says, placing it on my outstretched palm. A place called Brantford. I look at the return address. The name is not familiar. I sit down beside Luca and rip the envelope open. A sprig of lilac falls out. I catch my breath. I pull out the sheets and unfold them. Paper clipped to the front page is a photo of a girl. Her hair is woven into two tight braids, and she sits between a dark-haired man and woman. He is not the Nazi officer that I saw in the bombing. She is not the blonde woman from the car. These people are strangers to me. They look kind. Who are they, and why are they with Larissa? That has to be your sister, said Luca. She looks so much like you. This is Larissa. The set of her mouth, the look in her eye, and that sprig of lilac. She remembers. I read, Dear Lida, I hope I have finally found you. I think I saw you during the war. Was that you with the OST badge outside the burning factory? I wanted to run to you, but they wouldn't let me. Please tell me I found you. I've been searching nearly a year, writing the Red Cross, praying for news that you survived the war. I live in Canada now with my adoptive parents, Marsha and Ivan Kravchuk. They call me Nadia. That is a long story, but please know that I am safe and I am loved and I miss you very much. I have so much to tell you, dear Lida, and questions to ask, but there's one thing that I would like to ask you now. Would you like to immigrate to Canada? Marsha and Ivan will sponsor you. Please write back to me at this address. I will pray every day for a letter. I miss you and I love you, Larissa. I hold the letter to my heart, and tears stream down my face. Larissa, I didn't find you, but you found me. I could nearly burst with joy. Luca's arms wrap around me. I open my eyes and look at him. He is smiling, but I can tell that he is afraid. What good news, he says. Now you can leave this place. I brush a bit of wild hair away from my eye. Luca, so can you. Where I go, you go. And that's the end. What a good story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Talk to you later.